Hello, welcome to the European edition of Flux meeting. I have a short meeting because we've just come back from New Year and it's not the people here. But let's go through the agenda. What do we have? Let's have a look. Just the standing agenda by the look of it. But let's just do it like this. Does anyone have anything to report on what's happening on the way to GA? I don't.
Negative.
Nothing from Max?
Nothing from me.
Okay. I kind of feel like probably not much has happened between last time we talked and now, since it's been Christmas.
I guess not.
Yeah. Okay. And audit follow-up. I think we talked briefly about this last meeting, or maybe not briefly. Let's have a look. I'm just going to review what was said last time. So Sunny was going to have a look at the fuzzing PRs, which is good, I think, because I keep getting notifications about those. It'd be good to land them. And Paolo was looking at static build for source controller, and I'm guessing that would extend to image automation controller, which also includes some libraries. And last time we also talked about the RFCs, and we've since landed one of those, which I think is good progress, and it kind of unblocks the way for some of the designs that Stefan has been working on. Okay, is there anything to report on the, oh wait, I was just talking about audit follow-up. Is there anything anyone wants to add on audit follow-up? Security audit follow-up, or on kind of preparation for applying for graduation in CF?
So that's more of a question. We still have like 9 open to-dos and 10 in progress. So are we, is our goal to get all of these done before applying? Before going GA, or?
Yeah, good. Both good questions, actually. Possibly we should do some prioritization. Oh, Sunny's here. Hi, Sunny. Sunny, we've just been doing the standing agenda. So talking about GA and security audit, and with Max just asked, are we going to try and do all of the things that are in the security audit backlog before either GA or applying for graduation CNCF? And I think that's both of those are good questions. And I think we need maybe a wider discussion about that. I think the idea is to do as many as we can, but there are quite a few which are sort of about documentation, and not to minimize documentation, but they're not vulnerabilities. In fact, very few of the things were vulnerabilities, and therefore there's perhaps less urgent that they get addressed. But we do want to take security especially seriously right now. So it's worth considering trying to get all of them done before trying to be GA. I certainly think we should figure out the multi-tenancy story, which at present is a bit neither here nor there. But that's just my opinion. Anyone else care to venture an opinion on that? Okay, yeah. So I think maybe next week we could talk about it, assuming that we have a sort of broader audience for it. Okay. So there's nothing else on there's a blank item in the agenda, but I don't think there's anything else. Does anyone want to bring something up?
Yeah, I was working on HTTP proxy support for source controller. There is an ongoing PR, and I've been testing that. I think we need to document a few things. I'll paste the link to the, yeah. So there are certain things in this change which works for Go Git, and some things that don't work in libgit too. So in that PR, I have linked some issues from libgit too, where they don't support HTTP proxy. HTTPS proxy works, not HTTP, but with GoGit, both works. So I guess we need to update some documentation, making it clear what works with which implementation. I was working with some contributors for testing that. Seems to be working fine.
Oh, does it right? It's a PR from third party, so to speak. Yeah. Okay.
It just got too involved. Like you have to set up a proxy. Here's a Go proxy to set up a test proxy, and then check if a request is going through. Check the user agent if it's a Git client or something else. But it's clear now. I think it'll be easy to write a test.
Yeah. So is there are you just sort of seeking other opinions, a second or third or fourth opinion?
Just letting you know if you think anything about it.
I can have two.
Options, yeah, okay.
And maybe Kingdon, you can recommend about how we document it, where people will be able to see it. What works with libgit or what works with GoGit.
Sure, I'm happy to help with that.
Cool, thank you. Sunny, did you want to mention the work you were writing a bit of extra documentation about the package runtime rewrite?
Right, I can share the docs. The docs. So I have been documenting a lot of the refactoring or rewrite that we are doing. And what is it? I am documenting to describe it to people who wants to know what's happening, how we are doing this. So I wrote two docs. There will be another doc. The first document is about K-series generations. What are generations and what it means, and the mechanism behind generations. And there is another doc which is trying to create some rules out of those generations. And I also made a tool to automate those, to automatically check those rules Pasting all the links.
Yeah, so we talked about this a bit privately and thought that maybe one, more documentation is good, and two, the tool you made could be used in a bunch of different places because it basically checks that you are always outputting a correct model, like a correct state, doesn't it? So you could use it at runtime or in CI or even in unit tests, but pretty much anywhere. I quite like the idea of using it at runtime. So always check every time you exit that you are saving a correct set of conditions.
Right. I still have to discuss this with Hide. I haven't told him anything about this. So you can go through it. If you have any feedback, we can talk about it. And maybe we'll have an RFC describing all these things. I'm working on another document which describes the change in the controller pattern, how we are changing the way we write the reconciliation loop, how we divide it into something simpler. So that'll be ready soon. I'll share when it's ready.
Awesome. Cool. I like the idea of using the opportunity of the rewrite to bolster the design documentation, reference documentation. Hi, Stefan.
Hey, sorry for being late. I have calendar issues again. I think I've canceled the one in December and everything went away. So I'm going to re-add the calendar.
Yeah, I think that's the way to do it. Cool. Everything's in the notes so far. We did have the standing agenda of anything that's happened that pertains to GA milestone, and the other one is the anything that pertains to the security audit backlog. And Max asked the question, which I think deserves a kind of broader discussion, so maybe we should wait for next week, but just to put it on the table here. Should we try and complete the backlog before GA or before applying for graduation? Which I think is two different questions, but both quite interesting.
So is the fuzzing stuff in that backlog? It is, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would move the fuzzing to its own project and for tracking it, all those issues and pull requests, and focus on everything else than fuzzing before GA, before anything else. I think there aren't that many issues left, and we should definitely strive to fix them this month. Everything except fuzzing. I mean, that would be my suggestion.
Paula had a discussion with me. It felt like he would be interested in working on this fuzzing stuff. So maybe he'll pick it up before me.
Yeah, cool. But I would not blocked anything or set any expectations around fuzzing or link fuzzing to GA or graduation or anything like that. It's desirable to have fuzzing, but I don't think it's a requirement, a high requirement for anything that we are doing. I would really like to get things going on the refactoring side because, yeah, so Sule is working on the Flux diff command that means refactoring, customized controller, and a lot of the things that are in there around generating manifests, validating them, building customized overlay and so on, and making that a library so both the CLI and the controller can use. So when people run, for example, Flux diff, the CLI, it will have an identical output to what customized controller, the Flux controller does inside the cluster, right? So in order to ensure that we have the same engine, we need to extract that out of customized controller. The apply part, I did the apply part, that's already extracted and it's its own package, but now we need to extract more things around how we validate YAML, how we build them and so on. And I've noticed couple of days ago, there is a breaking change in the logging interface of controller runtime.
Which version?
And so 0.11.0
The latest
comes with, so we can upgrade from 0.10 to 0.11 unless we also bump the logger interface everywhere. Relu has been doing the work of upgrading all our projects to Go 1.17 and controller runtime 0.11. And yeah, like everything now has stopped because of, you know, source control and the fact that we cannot bump it. It's already, so the new versions are already in the refactoring branch. And this also blocks the Flux diff work and all the refactoring because now Flux package, all the Flux packages in the package repo are on 0.11 and the new logger interface, right? So we are yet again in a point where a breaking change from one of our dependencies are, you know, blocking multiple parallel things that shouldn't depend on. They basically don't depend on each other, right? The diffing part, what we are doing in customized controller has no dependency on source controller in any way, but because we share the same controller runtime, we are now at this situation. So
question, does the Flux diff, if you remove that, does that remove any blockages? As in not remove it entirely, I mean just not make it or defer it until later. Is it Flux diff that's kind of the keystone that's holding everything, making everything depend on other things?
no,
Okay.
the thing that where we are stuck now, so all our packages have been upgraded to Go 1.17 and controller runtime 0.11. So we cannot upgrade any controller that uses the source controller API to the new packages because the source controller API depends on controller runtime 0.10 that has a dependency on the logger, the controller runtime logger that has a breaking change. So that's
Source
where
controller specifically has that dependency, but not other things? Or?
Yeah, we upgraded source control, the control runtime upgrade for source control is in the refactoring branch. So we may want to cherry pick that into the main branch. Again,
Yeah,
do that
if it would
stuff
unblock things.
So that will unblock all the other things that we are trying to do, which are unrelated to source control refactoring matter.
Okay.
Which
I see.
branch has this control runtime update in source controller?
Can you say it again? Sorry, I have a lot of.
Which branch in source controller has this control runtime update?
In source controller, let me check.
Because the new refactoring branches, they are up to date with the main branch. The only difference they have is the controller refactor, no dependency change.
So the branch is called Go 1.17 here. It's also a pull request.
I think that's independent of refactoring. Right?
Yes, so we can. Oh, we can merge this one.
And you can rebase all the refactor branch.
And rebase all the refactoring branch is based on the main branch.
Should be easy.
Okay, so
they're already up to date. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe it's better to merge this one and this will unblock a lot of other things.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll reach out to Relu to rebase this one. Maybe it's up to date already. No, it's up to date, so I can just merge it as this. This will unblock a lot of things. Yeah, I had the impression this was opened against the refactoring branch, but it's not, it's against main. So yeah, sorry for the confusion. Yeah.
I'll update all those other branches.
Yeah, the changes are, they don't affect us in any way. I mean, we don't use those interfaces that come with breaking changes. They are used internally by control runtime. So if we manage to bump it everywhere, then we unblock this Go 117 upgrade for all projects. One more thing I wanted to bring up is I've seen a lot of reports just before Christmas around image automation controller that randomly freezes without telling what's going on. So what happens if you run image automation controller for a couple of weeks? I've run it for 1 week and a half and it completely stopped working. Like it does nothing. And other people have this issue after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and so on. Other have encountered this issue. I don't know if it's related or it's completely unrelated. It was an incident on the GitHub side, and their Git API went down for a couple of minutes. Image automation controller from that moment on stopped working. I don't know if what I've seen on my cluster, what others have reported on Slack and on GitHub issues are somehow related to a GitHub incident that we are not aware of. But the only way to solve it is to kill the image automation controller pod. And people are now creating cron jobs that are killing the image automation controller every couple of days just to avoid this issue. Given that at least 10 people said they had this issue, I also encountered it on my own cluster. I think we should try to look into it. I moved the issues into the image automation controller repo. It's really strange that source controller works, recovers after a GitHub incident or whatever, a network incident, while image automation controller doesn't. My guess is that it's something to do with libgit2, because image automation controller always uses libgit2, while source controller by default uses GoGit. My guess is that libgit2 does some caching on the DNS side. I don't know what's going on with that, but it's an issue that people have, and I've also encountered it on my test cluster. So I have no idea how to diagnose this. People posted heap dumps, CPU dumps as well, but I haven't found anything useful in there. Michael, could you look into this, or someone else?
Maybe. I mean, I have a stack of things to do, as everyone does. I don't know if I'll be any more successful than anyone else.
Were you able to reconcile it? Like through CLI, were you able to reconcile image automation?
Sorry, say that again.
Using the CLI, were you able to manually trigger a reconciliation? No?
No.
So every 10 hours, there is a resync right in control runtime. Even that was not running.
I see.
Right.
It just stops. Does it stop logging anything, or do I need to look at the bug? As in, is the whole process paused, or does it just not believe there's anything to do?
So the process doesn't freeze because of the readiness check, the liveness check works. If the process, if that was a contention of the process, something went down there, then Kubernetes itself would restart the pod. Or at least we would see in Kubernetes logs that, hey, the pod has issues and so on. So that's not the case. You have to delete the pod. The pod looks healthy. The health check, readiness check API responds. You do Flux reconcile. It says no updates made to the repo, while there are updates and it should do things. Also, the last update time of the status is like days behind. Even if it should do it, it should update the last reconcile timestamp when you run Flux reconcile, right? So I also talked to Hide in December about this, and his theory was that there is somewhere in the image automation controller, there is a return nil. And that tells the controller, do not reschedule this ever. And I think that's one possibility. We return a nil somewhere that, and from that moment on, nothing will happen for that particular
That's not quite true, because won't it eventually resync the cache and look at new versions of things?
The 10 hours resync thing. Even if you even if you return nil, after 10 hours, there will be a resync, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
It's 10 hours.
That's the thing I had in mind.
Okay, so that's not the case.
Yeah.
If it's 10 hours. I had the impression it's like number of 10 days or something. Okay. It's 10 hours. Okay, so that
sounds like it's reconciling, but it's not getting any new data, right? Still processing the old data.
Well, that's why I asked whether it was logging anything, because you would expect it to log at least something, especially if you put debug on, because there's a bunch of things that it does unconditionally, like most of the time it will actually clone the Git repo to see if there are any changes to make. So if you have trace messaging or debug on, then you'll see log messages, even if it's ultimately deciding there's nothing to do. But if the reconcile loop is just not running, then you won't see anything in the logs.
Yeah, so there is nothing in the log. If you look here,
Right.
like, so Flux get images run on December 17, return the no update images with the last run of December 15. So for 2 days, at least 2 days, it did absolutely nothing. It didn't update the status. And if the cache restarts, clears every 10 hours, that's definitely not the issue here. Right? There is some other thing that's going on. And I don't know if this one is related. Maybe it is. Maybe that's the root cause. But the idea is once the image automation controller runs into a cloning error, unless you restart the pod, it will never recover on its own.
Okay, but that seems like it should be simple to fix.
I think there are different things.
But yeah, there was another thing that Hida was looking into that was not stalling, but leaking. He thought resources were being leaked, and so he did a bunch of work on trying to be extra sure about closing anything that's created or deallocating anything that's created with the libgit2, none of which seem to help. So maybe it's related to that. Maybe this file handle being leaked or something, and therefore it just blocks indefinitely for some reason. Trying to allocate something.
This is all the memory allocated by libgit2c code, right? We call clean after every code to clean up the memory.
Yeah, which shouldn't need to be done in general because they should be finalized by Go when the garbage collected. But
I think the Git2Go examples or the tests they have, they do it in this way. They explicitly call and free the memory.
Mm-hmm. Well, it may not be memory specifically. It may be, or at least it may be not be memory that would otherwise be garbage collected. Maybe something that's sort of slyly allocated on the heap and C heap and then just left.
So
Who knows?
analyzing this should, if it's a memory leak, we should see here, right? In these heap dumps. So this is the case where GitHub has an incident or your own network, your egress fails, and the controller never recovers on its own unless you kill it. And someone managed to do a snapshot after 24 days of running the automation. So I'm guessing if we look at this heap things, we should see some signs of leakage.
Maybe. I mean, it might be. Yeah. Difficult.
Yeah, but at least someone managed to capture those. My GKE cluster runs on ephemeral nodes, so it restarted before I could ever get to the heap dump.
Oh, that's another issue. Okay. Yeah.
So this is an old thing. Like it happens from, I don't know, at least a year now. People are reporting, hey, I'm running image automation for a couple of weeks, and all of a sudden nothing works anymore. And some of them have this operation timeout or SSH cloning. They see this in the logs, and others nothing. There are no logs there and no status update. Maybe it's related, maybe not, but I just want to bring this to everyone's attention that, you know, we definitely have a problem here that I cannot say for sure where is the issue, but I'm really surprised that not all these users have the same issue with source controller, but if they are running source controller in default, then they are not using libgit2. So
yeah, I think there may be two things at play there. So one is that people won't run that by default. And the second is that when they are using it, they may be using it because they say using Azure. And possibly the problem doesn't exist if you use Azure, or is less likely, or something, right? So, so it may be the intersection of people who are using libgit2, but using GitHub may be quite small.
right. Yes.
Or GitHub or whatever other provider it seems to have a problem with. Or it may just be that the number of people using libgit2 is small enough that if only some of them have the problem, yeah. It's just no one's noticed yet. Who knows? Okay.
Yeah, maybe an idea here would be to crash the whole process when this happens. Have the readiness probe. If we cannot figure out what's going on, instead of having people writing cron jobs to kill image automation controller, maybe it's better for image automation controller to signal Kubernetes, hey, I'm blocked. Kill me, please. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's true of any controller in the sense that having a readiness probe, which is just a liveness probe, which is just a web server running off to the side, is pretty useless, right? You actually want it to be reporting on whether you're making progress on anything. So yeah, if that's the problem in a nutshell. And it applies to any controller. If the reconcile loop is not running, then it's not live, is it? So they should, all the readiness and liveness probe should be tied into whether the reconcile loop is running.
Yeah, for source controller, we basically tell Kubernetes, hey, restart me if it cannot serve artifacts anymore. But for everything else, we just use the controller runtime probes, which, as you said, are not doing much. They are just
right.
If the process completely freezes, like you have no more Go routines or stuff like that, only then Kubernetes will restart, which is definitely not the case here. Even if we have a leak, it doesn't impact so much the process. It doesn't freeze the process. The process is there. It still responds to HTTP calls.
Right. Yep. But then on the other hand, you don't want false positives either, or false negatives rather. Like if you do something like has the loop run in the last minute, then there's lots of reasons why it might not run for a minute. So then you'd just constantly be being restarted. Yeah. So it's tricky. Okay. Yeah, I can take a look at those. I don't know whether I'll be able, any answer will pop into my mind, but I may be able to move things forward.
Cool.
All right. I'll even put that down as an action item. Stefan, have you got the minutes up? Do you mind pasting those issues into the minutes?
Yes.
If not, I'll do that after I put them.
Yes, sure.
So should we briefly discuss again that the refactor is called the rewrite now?
Yeah, I made the point yesterday in another meeting that the branches that, well, the original package runtime and package whatever it was, changes that he'd made are not refactoring because they changed the behavior, and they're in fact rewrites. And everything that follows from those is not refactoring, it's rewrites. So we should really talk about rewrites, which is just kind of terminology. But there is a more serious point there, which is that instead of thinking about, well, should we delay GA for refactoring, we could actually think about, should we delay GA for individual changes that have been made, right? So, and in fact, think about rewrites of this kind in terms of what they're actually changing. Because on the surface of it, you would not delay something for refactoring, because something like that anyway, because it doesn't change. Refactoring would not change the behavior. It's just a hygiene thing, right? So you may want to get it done to get out of the way, but in terms of backward compatibility and things like that, it shouldn't delay anything. But this actually rewrites how the controllers behave and how they use conditions and stuff like that. So we should be talking about delaying things for changes that have been made. And if we do that, then we can talk about whether we actually want to have those changes before, or whether they can wait, or whether we do them at all. At present, they're just all lumped into one big thing that's kind of labeled refactoring, and it's sort of inarguable, right? It's like, do we want this? Well, we sort of have to have it. But it may turn out there are things we can do with that.
Stefan, before you join, I pasted some links in the controller rewrite docs section. So those are links related to the rewrite, like whatever we are introducing, documenting all those. It's not complete. There is one more doc I'm working on. I'll share that whenever it's ready. These are related to case status and the status conditions.
Controller check.
That's another tool I started creating to avoid manual checking of these conditions. Create some rules, and then using this tool, we can just run the tool and check if conditions are proper. Like if reconciling is true, ready should not be true, that kind of things. If solve is true, ready should not be true. Because there are some rules in that document. So this tool automates those processes. You don't have to think about it. The tool will verify for you. So we discussed we can run it. We can run this tool in runtime before patching the object. We can perform a check. What is the status conditions we come up with? If it's valid, then we patch. If it's invalid, then maybe we retry, do a requeue and process again. Or we can do some similar things in the test itself. But I think test, at the end of the test, you check what's the status of the object. If it's valid, fine. Invalid, something's wrong with the code.
Yeah, it's a great idea, because right now in every controller in our testing, we check if the status reflects what we expect, right? And it's quite easy because we have a single condition, it's called ready. It's a one line of code to check it, and another line of code to check the message. But now it gets way more complicated. We have three conditions, they have relationship to each other, and the stall condition has to be removed when the reconciliation works. So from 1 or 2 lines of code, what we used to do until now, it will get to, I don't know, 20 lines of code, and adding that to each single test it's really not desirable. So yeah, it's like it's a great idea, especially if we can get this into Flux package in the test Flux package /test and have there this utility, so we can assert it in with a single line of code in our unit tests, and replace what if you look, for example, in customized control, every single test ends up with, hey, what's the ready status, right? And replace that with a helper that doesn't only check the ready status and its message, behind the scenes also check for case status as well, without having to write this over and over. That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm for having some helper in Flux package for this. Yeah. Oh, one thing, we use this eventually, right, to check. So we do some changes in our unit tests, right? And then we have this function that checks the status and waits for it to, for the control logic to happen and so on. Maybe can we incorporate that in the helper so we don't have this everywhere, and we can only write eventually helper condition, check conditions, and here is what I want to check.
I don't think that's the right place for it, because you want the observable status to be correct all the time, right? So you're not waiting for it to become correct. You want it to be correct every time you see it. You see what I mean? Maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're suggesting.
So, okay, let me give you an example. In customized control, I'm changing something in the source. Then I'm waiting for customized control to receive an event that the source changes. Then customized control has to take action on that, do something with the source changes, and I'm using eventually to check, for example, that the new reconciliation failed because the change was I'm changing an immutable object. So I have to wait for all this to happen, and my end result is ready false, and this is the error message has to contain the word immutable, right? So it cannot happen instantly. You have to wait for all the things to happen, retries, pulling the source, and so on, right? And I'm saying, okay, now I'm changing the source, and eventually it should end up at this result where ready is false, stall is true with case status, and so on, right?
Oh, okay, that's not quite, I mean, yes, you can do that, but that's not quite what Sunny's been working on, which is constraints on the conditions to make sure they're correct, right? So for your test, you might want to say, for instance, eventually it reaches a state where I know it's processed the latest thing that I changed. And then it should be, after you've eventually reached that state, you can say, is the stalled condition true? And separate thing, are the status conditions correct? Meaning, if the stalled condition is true, that's the thing I wanted, but the ready condition has to be missing or false, and so on and so on and so on. So you would not wait for that to become the case. You would wait for whatever sign that it's been processed, and then check that the status conditions are true. But you can also do this just do this as an assertion at runtime in the controller, right? It doesn't even have to be in the test. It could just be when I save the status, then it must be true for me to be able to save it. Sorry, it must be correct, consistent for me to be able to save it, and otherwise it should error. So yeah, you could certainly have it in test, but you could also have it at runtime. Because it's saying I'm only ever moved from a correct state, a consistent state to another consistent state, if you see what I mean. So you always want that to be the case.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what I will be doing inside the eventually function, I will call this helper that Sun is building, where I'm giving it the expectation. My expectation is for ready to be false, for example, right? And that helper will also check, is the stalled condition present? Is the stalled condition set to true? Is the message the same as for the ready condition? Is the ready condition set to false, and so on? All the things that.
Yeah, but it's not like a bulk check. It is a check. Is it consistent or not? Right. So you want two things. You want the
Right.
You're trying to. You see what I mean? You want a particular condition to be true, and you want the set of conditions to be consistent. So those.
It's a bit different.
So you could do that, and eventually, or you could just do it at the end once you've figured out that it's been processed. But either one is fine. But yeah. So yeah. So you're not checking. It's done, and these conditions all line up in the way I say. You're just saying it's done, and it's consistent. You see what I mean? And consistent has a static definition. It's like these things can't both be true. If you've got this one, you've got to have all the rest of them clear, stuff like that. Okay.
I think we can make something that will help with eventually checks. But right now, this tool is just checking if you're at any point your conditions are correct. It's not something weird. I think we can make it.
Yeah, so maybe a different helper that will just look at observed generation. So we don't do the, hey, eventually observed generation has to equal this generation. Then I'm going to look at the conditions. Then I'm going to see if the ready condition is correctly mirrored into the case status conditions, right? So instead of doing this in every controller, we can have different helpers first that checks that, okay, it reaches the state, the final state where observed generation equals the object generation. Then I can use the other helper and say, are all the conditions correct, reflecting what I know? Ready is false. Is the case status conditions, are the case status condition on pair with the ready condition, right?
Right now it does that. It ensures that the word generations are correct numbers. If something's failing, there will be variations in the generation number. And if there is a failure, that failure is reflected in the ready condition as well. Those things are done right now. But I'll think about what you mentioned. I think we can make something to help with them.
Okay.
Right now in source controller, at the end of me test, we have some state assertions that this condition has this value, like 3-4 lines. I think that could be improved by what you're asking for.
Yeah, I think that's what you were also trying to point out, Stefan, is that that not all of them really test what they need to test. You should be testing, yes, this condition's here, but you should also be testing and none of the other ones, and at least one of the other ones, or something like that. Yeah. And this is what Tony's library would definitely help with. Cool, we better wrap this up because we've just gone over time.
Yep.
So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Nice to see you in the new year.
Yeah, happy new year.
Happy new year. Bye.
Here.
Thank you.
Bye.